the events that really stand out in my mind are ones where I actually met people, where I actually face-to-face, and some of them were difficult meetings, but people who were well-known to most people, like LBJ, my meeting with LBJ, my meeting with Sam Rayburn.
Tell me, why did you meet Sam Rayburn and LBJ?
Well, I was a student at the University of Texas. I put forth an idea to the student radio station, KUTFM. I said, you don't have a public affairs program. You play music, all kinds of music, you know, and so on. You have sports and so on, but you don't have public affairs. And that's what I was interested in, you know, in public affairs, what's going on in the world, current events, government, and so on. And that was before CNN. And so the director, Winston Bodie, said, well, what's your idea? And I set forth an idea that I would produce and direct once a week for a half hour, that it would go over the air for a half hour. It would be taped and different things that would have a theme song in the beginning and so on. And I produced a program. I can't even think of the name of it, but I produced a program that for them. And in the process, I would interview people. Austin was always a busy place. It's the capital. It's a big university. Very interesting people come through. Political and historical and scientific and whatever. And so there was never a problem of finding people to interview on worthwhile subjects like tektites and things, different scientific things and so on. General Aramburu was coming to town for some reason. General Aramburu of Argentina. He later became president of Argentina and later was assassinated. And I met him here in Austin at a hotel and interviewed him. It was all on wire recording, the old tape recordings and so on.
And when you interviewed LBJ, what was he at the time?
Well, what happened was I had read in the paper, here I was a student and my courses were paid for by the government, but I worked part-time, different jobs in photography and so on, and I needed money. And so I'd read about LBJ's famous picnics that he would hold on the LBJ ranch, and barbecues and so on. And I read that the president of Mexico, Adolfo López Mateos, who had been visiting President Eisenhower and heading back to Mexico, was going to be the guest of LBJ on his ranch. And the press was invited. So I said to Mr. Bodie, Mr. Bodie, aren't I a member of the press? Producer, he says, yeah. And he says, well, can you get me, go down to the Senator, there's a majority leader, Senator Lyndon Johnson was the majority leader, the Senate majority leader. He's got an Austin office. Can you get the credentials for me? So he got credentials for me, and I got a friend of mine who spoke from where I lived, who spoke English, translated. He was going to be my translator, spoke Spanish and so on. And I was going to ask questions of the president of Mexico and other people from his entourage about a new agreement between the two universities, Mexico City University and University of Texas, for exchanging students. And I had a list of different possibilities to talk about and interview people and put together a program out of these different interviews. And so they gave me this big tape, this big recorder, big heavy magnecorder, whatever it was called, with a microphone with a wooden stick to it, attached to it, and a big cable. And so we went down with my credentials on the LBJ ranch and waited until people were eating dessert. Everybody else was standing around, but the dignitaries could sit at tables outside and barbecue. So we stuffed ourselves with food. I promised my friend he could have food too, and that's why we went to begin with, to get food, free food. And there's LBJ sitting with President Adolfo López Mateos. And I waited for dessert, which was the end of the meal. And I said to my friend, I said, let the tape run. Okay, you listen on your headset, let the tape run, and I had a real long cable for the mic cord, and because that's what it was for, and I walked out with the mic cord wound around my arm, and came up and waited until they were talking back and forth, and they were finished with their food. I said, "Excuse me, Mr. President, could I ask you a question?" And LBJ stood half up in his seat and said, he pushed the microphone out, and he said, "Get that thing away from the president. This is not a what do you call it, a press conference. This is not a press conference." And the President Mateos had already indicated, like, "Yes, I'll answer your question." But then after LBJ yelled at me, Mateos began to laugh, and he said, "What could I do?" In other words, it's his place. And so I said, "Okay, thank you." And then I walked away. All this is on tape.
Right.
Then I walked away, and there was a sign in front of somebody that said, "Education Minister from Mexico." And I asked him the same question about this exchange program and whatever. Then I saw, down at the end, Sam Rayburn. Now, this was the summer of the election, the primary election for the Democratic Party for President of the United States, the 1960 election. And Sam Rayburn came out in favor of LBJ as opposed to JFK. Oh, by the way, Harry Truman was there too, but I never got to talk to him. Anyway, so I knew from my government class at the University of Texas about Sam Rayburn. He was so proud of the fact that he was reelected so many times, means once every 4 years, or 2 years, whatever it was, as opposed to a senator who gets reelected every 6 years, who doesn't have to be reelected that often to stay in office. So he had a reputation as being proud of the fact that he was the people's representative from his district. And so, any case, I remembered that. I was thinking about what should I call him. I was going to ask him a question about the election. And I walked over, the tape is going, I got the mic under my arm, I have a clipboard, which more or less hides the microphone. And I walk over, and he and Sam Rayburn are talking. And, he and the head of the Department of Public Safety. And he looked like Kojak, bald head. He always had a cigar in his mouth and so on. He looked tough, Sam Rayburn. And so I walked over, and I wanted to interrupt the conversation. And I wanted to say, "Mr. Rayburn," or, Congressman Rayburn. And I said, "Senator Rayburn." I realized I said the wrong thing. And he looked up and said, "Who the hell do you think you're calling senator?" And I wanted him to stop, to realize that we're being taped. And so I took my clipboard away, and I showed him the mic, and I said, "We're on the air," which is wrong. And he said, "Get that damn thing away from me," just like LBJ had done, and pushed the microphone away.
So you got a meal, though.
Pardon me?
But you got a meal.
Oh, I got the meal, and he finally answered my question. I felt like walking away and not saying anything, but what do you want to know? And I asked him about the chances of LBJ winning and so on, and then I walked away.